section.
You're live.
Hey, welcome, folks. This is House Corrections and Institutions Committee. This is Tuesday, May 12th. We have with us Legislative Counsel Katie McGlynn to go over with us our amendment to S-193. And there's a new draft out for the whole bill. Well, we're not going to go through the whole bill today. We're going to go through those sections that will pertain to our proposed amendment to the bill that we will be proposing to House Judiciary. So Katie, turning it over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Katie McGlynn, Office of Legislative Counsel. Let me tell you what this draft is and why it's marked the way it is. Since you got that draft with the many colors on it, there's been more work on the bill and the committee next door, this committee. So all of the changes highlighted in yellow are changes that have been made since you've seen that. So it no longer retains all of that various color highlighting. I got this back from the editors about 3 minutes before I walked in here. I haven't had a chance to look at all the edits, so I threw a big draft watermark across it. So subject to change once we actually get in and look at some of those edits.
Thank you, Katie, for all the work you're doing. I know.
Yeah, no problem.
A lot of balls that you're going into right now.
So let's jump in. So we have this legislative intent section. Last time we spoke about how it felt a little strange to sort of lead with DOC when DOC had really no role in the forensic facility by the time the various changes from the different committees were made to it. So instead, a sentence has been added to sort of generally summarize what the vision for the forensic facility is, and then have that sentence about DOC come secondarily. So it is the intent of the General Assembly that the Secretary of Human Services shall establish and operate a locked, secure forensic facility for the competency, restoration, evaluation, stabilization, treatment, and care of persons who have not been found competent to stand trial or not guilty by reason of insanity for serious criminal offenses. And again, that list on line 11, that's the list of services that came from healthcare, and you'll see it repeated throughout the bill. And then the sentence that you originally had, the Department of Correction shall not operate or staff the forensic facility with the exception that employees of DOC may provide security services for the facility around the outside perimeter of a forensic facility if it is co-located on the grounds of a correctional facility.
So that addresses the concern that we were talking about a little bit, because we did talk about the intent language. And I think we just wanted to be real clear that DOC did not provide services within the facility. So the first lines 9 and 10 really clarify that. And this came out of the meeting with the 3 chairs on Friday afternoon, because I brought to the table the concern from this committee about making sure DOC wasn't providing services within the facility. And this is what was sort of discussed, how we could address that. So questions from the committee? Thoughts? Nothing? I don't believe it. You're not here yet. Is that better? Does it work better for folks?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Everybody's quiet? Okay. Let's go to our next proposed amendment, which is section 5. I'm right. Yeah. Section 5 begins on the very bottom of page 19, really starts on page 20.
So we start off with the definition. And this is where we landed. Forensic facility means a locked, secure facility or placement licensed as a therapeutic community residence where AHS provides for the secure competency restoration of persons with a qualifying condition who are involved in the legal system and who do not require hospitalization level of care. and the person is transferred pursuant to the two subsections in this title, the not guilty by reason of insanity and not competent to stand trial. So that's what those cross references are. Okay. And then in subsection B, this is where, if you remember, we have sort of the list of services and considerations for the forensic facility.
So let me just backtrack a little bit here. So there's a whole new section A here that you've reconfigured from our previous draft. Katie.
Right? The forensic facility definition?
Yeah, I mean, structured a little different than what we had in the previous draft, because the previous draft, it's just structured a little different. Because capital A in our previous draft dealt with competency can be restored section.
You know, I saw when I got it back from editing that there were a lot of updates to the subdivisions and how they were structured. I don't know that there are substantive shifts because of that. I think it's just
Anything
better
there?
conformed with our subdivisions.
Competency can be restored begins section capital B.
I know, but it was an A.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I just don't want to be.
And I wonder if the new A is that,
I don't think there was anything meaningful meant by the changes in subdivisions. I think it was just to conform with our VSA style.
okay. Okay.
Okay. Do you want to spend more time with this definition or move on to subsection B?
Move on. You're talking where competency can be restored? B?
Section B,
The little b or big B?
right here on line 5 of page 21. This is where we have some lead-in language, and then we have the list of the different services and considerations about.
Okay, I want to hold here because I'm looking at folks around the room here. I thought, can we share your document so that folks can see this?
I think it's available online. Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah, finish. Thinking on the.
Oh, is it not shared? I'm
It's not.
sorry.
No.
I'm scrolling along like it
I know,
is.
that's- But I'm just concerned for folks sitting around. Just realized it wasn't up on the screen.
Here we go.
So let's go back. I hate to do this, Katie, but let's go back to the top of page 20.
Page 20. Okay.
So this is the definition of forensic facility. So it's structured a little differently than what was in the previous drafts that some folks may have with A, where it defines the forensic facility itself. And that is that wasn't in the previous draft at all. This particular section A.
Question,
Mhm.
line 2, I like the update for 1, 2, and 3, except what's the definition of community?
Therapeutic community residence. I can pull it up for you.
I remember what we did. I remember what we did, Katie, with A and B.
Mhm.
We agreed to flip those on Friday. Where B,
That was the 3 and 4 in Eric's section.
well, I think what it was, we wanted to lead off with a definition of forensic facility and not with competency can be restored definition.
Oh, okay.
That's where it was. So in our old draft, in our new draft, the new A was the old B. That's where it came from.
Here you go.
So what happened to our screen share? Okay.
I was asked for the definition of therapeutic community residence.
Oh, okay.
So I'm pulling that up. Means a place, however named, excluding hospitals as defined by statute, that provides for-profit or otherwise transitional individualized treatment to.
Nope.
Sorry,
Put it up.
I'm catching up with you. Thank you. You're
Okay,
excluding hospitals.
And these residences are licensed through Dale.
Yes. And what about,
Department of Aging, Department of Disabilities, Aging, and Independent Living. There's DD. Mary?
what about nursing homes?
nursing homes, are they excluded? Nursing homes are their own entity, but you have
The
the,
nursing home, the license, the different.
they're separate.
So like our mission care in Bennington would not be considered as a place to put a person for forensic if they have become competent.
The reason to be.
Could you just identify yourself?
Hi, I'm Dr. Lowe and I'm the commissioner for Dale. A nursing home license is a nursing home. It's a very specific entity.
The one in our community is not, it's a little different. You've added other populations to it, including folks from corrections. So would these folks be able to go there?
It's not different in its license. It takes people with complex and they're not the only ones in the system that takes complex cases. What you're referencing are people who have a history of criminal justice issues can be in that nursing home if they meet the criteria for a nursing home. It's a nursing home first.
But it would not take any of the folks within the forensic realm, correct?
So what you're talking about with this bill is people who meet the criteria for this very narrow, small group of people who are charged with a charge that holds the potential for a life sentence, right?
Right.
If those folks were returned to the community because they were found to be not competent, non-restorable to competence, and they were determined to have a low enough risk to return to the community, they would return to the community under some level in our bill, some in the bill that's before you, of supervision or custody. And if they needed a nursing home level of care, just like anyone would have to meet the criteria for a nursing home level of care for anyone to be placed in a nursing home.
Yes or no, they could possibly be considered for that nurse, correct?
They could possibly be considered for any nursing home, but that would not be upon their release. If they had that level of need, they could be brought to a hospital or to it. This isn't an apples and oranges question. So it's not related to the folks who are currently facing these level of charges. So theoretically, could somebody who had a history of being in this facility end up needing to be in a nursing home level of care? It's possible that they would be in this facility. They could be in other facilities, but the licensure is completely different than a residential therapeutic community.
So Mary, is your question, is there, for the definition of therapeutic community residence, would that include a nursing home? Is that more your question?
More or less.
And it's, what I'm understanding is no, because they're licensed totally different. So a nursing home would not be considered a therapeutic community residence as defined.
But again, if you heard what you said,
Is that
it could, and they could be possibly placed elsewhere.
if they
So
qualify,
that does open the door for it.
if they qualify for nursing home care upon their release?
Just like anybody now. This doesn't change any of people being returned to the community after they're released from a forensic facility and end up as a Vermonter who needs
Nursing home care.
nursing home level of care.
Kevin?
And I think I know the answer, but at present, do we have any forensic facilities in Vermont? Okay, I didn't think we did.
This is going forward.
understand. Just want to make sure that. Into that.
No, let's go back to the bill. Because this section here, folks, section 5,
Commissioner's got her hand up too.
yeah, hang on. Section 5 does not take effect until January 1st of 2028. Okay? There's going to be a legislative session in between. Okay? Commissioner Hawes, Department of Mental Health, welcome.
Hi, yes, thank you. For the record, Emily Hawes, Commissioner for the Department of Mental Health. I did want to raise a point around Department of Corrections supervision when somebody is out in the community, and I know that we will highlight that in a few minutes, as it is no longer in this bill. However, to Representative Morrissey's point, when folks have completed their work in the forensic facility and are deemed appropriate to discharge out into the community in whatever placement makes sense, previous versions of this bill had a collaboration of supervision between the Department of Corrections and whatever appropriate department, like Department of Mental Health or Department of Aging and Independent Living or the Department of Health, that collaborative work, if somebody would need to be returned to the forensic facility, then that would be done under the supervision of the Department of Corrections. That section is no longer in the bill, and I know that Commissioner Bowen and Commissioner Murad were going to talk about this as well. But that does raise a very insurmountable challenge when somebody needs to be brought back to a forensic facility because their community situation has changed in such a way that we would want to have them transported and brought back, and that would live with the Department of Corrections.
So we'll get to that section further down. I don't want to confuse the committee any more than what's already confused. So let's go back to the beginning, top of page 20. So this was in our previous draft and it was letter B. It's been kicked to the front. Any questions on A? That's the definition of what the forensic facility would look like. Trying to figure out how to do this because the committee needs to really go through the language. Yeah, I want the committee to go through the language here. Unless we need some clarity from you folks. Okay. Katie.
Okay. Next is subsection B. Sorry, I keep getting email pop-ups as I'm sitting here about other things happening elsewhere in the building. Subsection B, the Secretary. Yep. The Secretary of Human Services shall establish and operate a locked, secure facility for the competency, restoration, evaluation, stabilization, treatment, and care of persons who have been transferred pursuant to those two sections. The forensic facilities, clinical, forensic, and competency restoration services shall be overseen by the Agency of Human Services Medical Director. The Department of Corrections shall not play a role in the forensic facilities operation, the provision of services, internal security, or post-release monitoring of any former residents. So the reason that sentence was added there in the lead-in before we look at the list that's going to follow is because there was many conversations over the items on the list about qualifying them that, well, could this be interpreted to mean if AHS does it, that it could be assigned to DOC? So I've tried to add this sentence in that would be applicable to everything that's coming after it. This statement that DOC is not playing a role in the forensic facility operation, provision of services, internal security, or post-release monitoring of any former residents. And that would sort of frame everything that is to follow.
And that was reflective of conversation within this committee last week. Now, I don't know if we're in the same spot or not. Kevin?
So is it premature to understand if DOC is not providing internal security, who then would?
Agency of Human Services in their operations of the facility. Just like they do right now for the state hospital. It's not DOC that provides any security within the state hospital. The secure residential, step-down facility, 16-bed facility, mental health, DOC does not offer security within that building. The juvenile facility is a secure facility. DCF staffs that. DOC does not provide security within those buildings.
The feasibility plan asks that question also. So that would be information you're going to get back in the feasibility plan about how security would work.
So because we do not currently have a forensic facility, anybody that's currently held on charges in Vermont right now is being secured by someone other than DOC right now.
That's not accurate.
That was a question. Who is internally securing the people that are currently charged in Vermont, wherever they are, since we don't have a forensic facility right now? Who's providing that internal security right now for these individuals?
I think it depends where they are. They're in DOC, then they are being provided security by correctional officers. If they have a clinical need in statute to be at in DMH custody, then they're in a hospital or on an ONH in another facility, in which case it's not DOC security. So I think it
Gotcha.
depends on the location.
Thank you.
And it depends on the court's decision on where to place them as well. Because they could have a civil charge, they could have a criminal charge, but they may not be in a correctional facility even with a criminal charge. Joe?
The question arose Friday afternoon, I believe, regarding language, the end of line 12 and 13, whereby DOC would not be involved in post-release monitoring of any former residents. And the question being, so how would that monitoring happen?
By whom?
Yeah,
DOC or other folks?
Well, it specifically prohibits DOC from doing that. And given that, I don't know if it's possible these individuals to be dispersed throughout the state, would it be feasible for another party to perform these monitoring services post-release?
So let's flag that question because I'm cognizant of Katie's time, number one, because she has other commitments she has to get to. So let's flag that because we've got all the players in this room because DMH does some monitoring right now. Dale might be under 248, Act 248. So it's very complicated out there right now. So let's flag that. Troy?
I think it's fair to say, and I'm happy to be corrected on this, that we are asking with this bill for a feasibility plan to be developed for how this post-release monitoring would occur. We're just saying it can't be DOC. Does that feel accurate?
I think you're asking for a feasibility plan, and a lot of the questions that are being raised at the table about post-release monitoring, about security, are part of that feasibility plan.
Right.
And you're providing some guardrails about what
Right.
you want to see in your feasibility plan.
So we're not saying there's not going to be post-release monitoring. We're not saying there's not internal security. We're just saying that at a forensics facility or folks who have been released from a forensic facility will not be monitored by DOC. But come up with a plan.
But also I want to put on the table this piece, the definition of the forensic facility does not become law
Right.
or in effect until January 1st of 2028. So the thinking is, as Katie says, a lot of these questions are going to be answered through the feasibility plan that's going to be presented in January of 27. And from that feasibility plan, the legislature will then act on that plan that then could change this language in terms of the definition of the forensic facility. Does that make sense?
Yes, the reason I'm asking the question is between today and that potential plan, these people are being taken care of somehow. We don't have that defined well, as far as I have been hearing over weeks. And that's my concern. So in the next 2 years, we might have a plan to officially take care of this small segment of people, which, as Connor and I have pointed out over and over again, may not be the most dangerous to the surrounding communities.
Okay. Let's keep going.
Okay, we'll look at this list in B. The forensic facility shall, in subdivision 1, be designed and operated in a manner that supports a therapeutic, recovery-oriented, and trauma-informed programming and a therapeutic community residence while maintaining appropriate levels of safety and security. Subdivision 2, not refuse any person it is ordered to admit and shall not require any clinical or diagnostic prerequisites for admission. Subdivision 3, provide for the safe evaluation, treatment, stabilization, and care of persons, including the ability to separate the population by sex or gender, and to otherwise address clinical, safety, or operational considerations as appropriate, including the possible operation of multiple facilities. Subdivision 4, follow the direction of the AHS medical director, who shall oversee all forensic, clinical, competency restoration services provided to transferred persons. Subdivision 5, implement staff qualifications, licensure, training, and supervision requirements that are sufficient to ensure that persons transferred to the forensic facility have access to clinically appropriate care, treatment, services, and supports consistent with individual needs and with applicable professional standards. Ensure that a registered nurse licensed in Vermont or a physician licensed in Vermont is available to provide care to transferred persons 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Ensure that persons receive clinically appropriate assessment and treatment planning and competency restoration plan, as appropriate, including the development of an initial person-specific treatment plan within 72 hours following transfer, which shall be reviewed periodically as clinically indicated. Top of page 3, the forensic facility shall ensure that clinical services and programming include psychiatric care, management of medications, education about court procedures, habilitation and trauma-informed care as appropriate, shall continue to provide evaluation, treatment, stabilization, and care of a resident who has regained competency while the resident awaits and participates in the resident's trial. It shall provide residents with interpreters as appropriate, and it shall implement grievance and appeals procedures. Next, we will look at section 7, I believe.
So section 7. Well, also before we get to section 7, we are proposing that we delete in the bill as it came over section 4A, which defines forensic facility definition, because we've expanded the definition and incorporated different pieces.
This 4A that we're striking through, is an annual report.
Oh,
So
I'm sorry.
Yep.
It's-
So
it's the next one.
the proposal had been to amend the
Sorry.
section you just looked at.
Yep.
And now the conversation in this committee was that, it was sort of premature to have an annual report if we don't exactly know what would be reporting on. Sorry to jump in.
No, that's fine. I was just looking at forensic facility definition.
Right.
Title.
Right. And then same thing with rulemaking. There's a large rulemaking section that came over from the House. But again, you're going to be getting a lot of information back in January, so it might be premature to say what will be in the rules prior to sort of having fully finalized what the forensic facility will look like. Section 6 is a section that healthcare asked for. And that brings us to section 7, the feasibility plan. So by January 1 of 27, the Secretary of Human Services, in consultation with BGS, shall submit a feasibility plan for the development and operation of a forensic facility to various policy and appropriations committees. The feasibility plan shall assume that operations, staffing, and programming at the forensic facility shall be provided by the Agency of Human Services or its departments, with the exception that the Department of Corrections shall not play a role in its operation, the provision of services, internal security, or post-release monitoring of any former residents. That's the same sentence you've already seen. But again, there were these conversations when we start getting into the list of what's in the forensic facility that felt like they could be handled all at once by having this lead-in language. So that was the goal in putting it there, that you're sort of putting your expectation up front and not getting, I guess, distracted by adding it into every subdivision in this list. So here's what you're asking for in the plan. The proposed location of a forensic facility, which shall be independent from a correctional facility, and if on the same grounds as a correctional facility, shall be separated by sight and sound. The proposed design plans for a forensic facility that allows for the ability to separate residents by sex or gender and clinical need. The number of beds within a forensic facility. The entity or entities responsible for operating and providing services in a forensic facility. The timeline for constructing a standalone forensic facility or fitting up an existing standalone facility to operate as a forensic facility. The estimated cost of constructing or fitting up and operating a forensic facility. Top of page 28. Which aspects of the TCR rule would need to be modified to operate the forensic facility as a TCR? The clinical services available at a forensic facility, including on-site competency restoration services. Subdivision 9, the proposed staffing levels, staff qualifications, and potential contracting needs necessary to establish a multidisciplinary clinical team at the forensic facility that reflects best practices, including required evidence-based trauma-informed staff training and multiple potential staffing strategies. Subdivision 10, the physical and staff security plan within and around the perimeter of a forensic facility, including therapeutic design and clinical supervision that reflect best practices, which shall not involve DOC, with the exception that employees of DOC may provide security services for the facility around the outside perimeter of a forensic facility if it is co-located on the grounds of a correctional facility. Subdivision 11, a resident discharge and community monitoring plan from each department with custody of individuals in the forensic facility that prioritizes community safety and provides residential, clinical, and case management services.
As this gets into the community monitoring plan from each department with custody of the individual.
Mhm.
So DMH could have custody, Dale could have custody. I don't know if Department of Health would have custody. The concern here was from the committee members, is there a loophole where DOC could be providing that monitoring in this language.
That's why we put that language up in the top of that.
Clarify. Okay, because that came up last week here in the.
Okay. So still moving through this list of what is part of the plan. Top of page 29, subdivision 12. Whether any opportunities exist for out-of-state placement of the forensic facility population and clinically appropriate programming while development of a forensic facility in Vermont is pending. A plan for the expansion of Act 248 to include individuals with cognitive disability. Subdivision 14, annual reporting metrics on the demographics, outcomes, and staffing at the forensic facility. And then 15, any recommendations for legislative action to effectuate the development of a therapeutic trauma-informed forensic facility. And in terms of timing, you have August and November status updates at the Joint Legislative Justice Oversight Committee on the development and of the feasibility plan. So that committee will be monitoring what is happening with the forensic facility planning over the summer and fall.
Yeah, just question on the definition again, Katie. So like top of page 20, we went over it a little bit. Forensic facility means locked, secure facility or the placement of a licensed therapeutic community residence, right? I'm wondering, like, as we're talking about all those things, they're equivalent in this sentence, right? Are we talking about a therapeutic community residence in all those points? Because that's what it feels like it, yeah.
So it's supposed to be locked, secure facility or placement licensed as a TCR. So TCR modifies both of them.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So it's not locked, secure facility or TCR placement.
Yeah, so I'm thinking TCR placement, if you're in a TCR, is that still relevant to all the bullets that we're talking about in those last few sections there?
Because
Right here?
it would be defined as a
Yes.
forensic facility.
Because that's a forensic facility, yeah. It just increases the scope quite a bit, I would think.
You say decrease or?
Increases, yeah.
An increase. Is that? So-
Am I making sense?
Yeah, you are.
Okay.
You know, we're not the committee that really looked mostly at this. It was more healthcare, human services, wasn't it?
Originally, several years ago, I think probably the TCR licensure came from that committee, but I don't know that they've been very engaged in modifying this definition.
So is Connor's interpretation of how you define the forensic facility means a locked, secure facility? Or it could also mean a therapeutic community residence?
No. It is a secure facility or placement that is licensed as a TCR. So a TCR should modify both facility or placement.
Okay,
If that's confusing, we can,
so AHS is responsible for the security at the placement, the PCR?
yes, do you want to get rid of placement? That came from the original language 4-ish years ago. So if that's what the sticking point.
Yeah, I was just trying to get my head around it, honestly.
Yeah.
It's, yeah,
Is there a placement that's not a facility?
Well, that's sort of why there's
Yeah.
a plan,
Right,
because we don't know what the proposal is going to be.
because
It could be a
right.
facility or a building that's modified, or might they come back with if there are multiple sort of appropriate placements throughout the state
Right.
in different existing facilities. I don't quite know what that would look like.
For what it's worth, I did not read it as Connor did. I read it as you've intended. But I can see the confusion.
Yeah, I can see the confusion. So every time we've talked about a forensic facility, we are assuming a state-run locked facility. Is that correct?
Mhm.
That's what we've assumed. And it is. So is the facility licensed as the therapeutic community residence?
Yes.
So we're not saying that a current therapeutic community residence that's in existence now would be brought in under this definition of forensic facility with this language?
No, you're saying that to create a forensic facility would have to be licensed as a TCR. And you're recognizing that that might require modification of the existing rule. You're in the feasibility plan asking what those modifications will be. So I imagine Dale would have to amend their rule and have a special forensic facility section that says, you know, sections X through Z don't apply to the forensic facility, or these conditions do apply to the forensic facility. But I am,
I wonder if the word placement.
Yeah.
Was throwing you, because if you take placement out, forensic facility means a locked facility licensed as a therapeutic community residence. So this forensic facility needs to be licensed as a TCR, and we're allowing in further language to modify the rules around the TCRs to accommodate the forensic facility. That's what we're saying. I think you've got to take out or.
okay.
Throws, good pickup. Because we don't want those temporary communities, those therapeutic community residents that may be out in the state of Vermont to be seen as a forensic facility. That was your thinking.
It just really changes how, yeah.
Got it. Anything on the feasibility plan? folks?
Excuse me.
And then we take out the interim forensic facility report, because there was an interim once it gets up and running, I believe. We took that out. Questions from the committee? Is this clearer to folks in terms of what our amendment would encompass?
Yes.
And when I hear silence, I don't know what people would think if there's a.
Clear to me.
Yeah.
Clear to me.
I think it's good.
Anything else for Katie? Because we've got to firm up our language here pretty soon.
Flesh.
Excuse me.
And Katie, you may be off the hook, but that doesn't mean that there won't be more language.
Okay, you know where to find me.
Then you know where to find us.
Okay.
Thank you, Katie.
That's dedicated.
You're welcome.
So we've got four commissioners here. We have the Commissioner of Mental Health and the Commissioner of Health on Zoom. We have the Commissioner of Dale, I'm still gonna call it Dale, and we have the Commissioner of Corrections. So we need folks to weigh in on these language changes that this committee is working on. So Commissioner of
Do you want to
Dale,
just do the, as a group?
you want a dog and pony show? We could do that.
We could do that. We could weigh in on particular areas.
Yep.
Okay.
And whoever wants to go first, I mean, I could be you, Commissioner, or however you
I'm
feel.
okay to get it started, but I know
Okay.
that Commissioner Weiss, Commissioner Hildebrand, and Commissioner Murray, we all have, I think, some things to say. First of all, I think we all appreciate the amount of effort and time that has gone into the work on this. I think that we are all quite concerned that DOC is removed from the role for which they are the expert in AHS. Without DOC's role as the secure provider of the security for this very narrow group of people, again, these folks are charged with the most heinous of crimes. They're not the general population of people that are, arrested and may have mental health challenges or may have developmental disabilities or other cognitive challenges or may have a substance use, long-term substance use issue. They are a narrow group. So that's why we talk about it as a small number of people, but they do a different kind of security issue and need than what you're referencing when you talk about DCF having some security responsibility in a particular type of setting or mental health in a different particular type of setting. And the idea of dividing up the responsibility within a forensic DOC facility between DOC and their expertise and the medical matters that are needed within this facility are really hallmarks of what we're envisioning. And on the end point where people could be released, again, remember, this is about due process. It's about accountability. It's about people charged with these most heinous of crimes who right now, to your question, sir, about where they are at this particular moment in time, they are in the corrections facilities, because with that level of charge and no road to supporting the competence, they are just there. So they are being served quite well by the really extraordinary folks that work in the Department of Corrections, but they have no path they're charged with a crime and have no path to restorability, which means they have no chance for their day in court, right? They don't have the due process we all expect to have without an effort towards developing and supporting them towards restoration of competence or for developmentally disabled attaining it. For those who are competent, they are right where they would be back in the system, going through the criminal justice process. For those who are non-restorable, then we are working on risk assessments. All of that is in the clinical realm. All of that would be under the AHS medical director's supervision, not correction supervision. The security for which DOC is the expert would be under DOC. So the idea of taking it out of that makes it almost, if not impossible, that's downright impossible for us to put something like this into the system and fill that gap by prohibiting DOC's extremely critical role in this process. We are kind of stopping it in the water. We don't have the ability as AHS to build what you're envisioning, certainly not in any short order. So if we're going to be waiting for some time for feasibility, we can tell you right now that that's not going to be feasible. TCR doesn't even exist in the kind of thing that you're thinking. There's one place where it's in a very specific mental health realm, but the development of a TCR for this multiple broad range of people that could come in, even though it should be a small number, because again, it's the most heinous of crimes. What we're trying to do is actually ensure that one, they get due process, two, that they're in a secure space where we can assess their risk, and that as they go through the system, they go through it in a way that provides protection for the person who's a vulnerable individual, but also for the community who's at risk if they do come out without the appropriate level of support. So the creation over here is really like stopping this process. And for sure, they are right now sitting right there in corrections. And this small population is not having any of this process happen. We are one of the only states that doesn't have a competency restoration process. And we're not going to be able to put that up in any kind of reasonable time frame without our what do I call it, the brother or cousin department within AHS that is Department of Corrections. So on that issue, it would be great to have weigh-in because we are all seeing it through the same AHS lens, but also through our departmental lenses.
So I have a question. Why do we not have restoration and competency programming right now? Because that's the gap, regardless of someone's criminal activity, whether it's a life sentence or being held without bail, it's impacting everyone that's going through the criminal system. Why do we not have a restoration
I would,
program right now?
I can say my piece of that. I'm here 2 years, so I know that this has been, these kinds of issues about what kind of security could happen in the community, what kind of security could happen in a facility, what can happen within corrections has come up, but keeps getting a pushback or not.
You're talking security. I'm talking restoration of competency. Why is there a gap right now?
Because it was never built here. Okay, and that's not the question you have. There may be people who have more history on it than I do. But it wasn't built here and it's just a looming gap. I don't know if anyone else has.
So we able to continue with questions?
Oh, Brian?
I'm not sure how you want to run it, Chair. I'm sorry, but it's the same kind of line of questioning, which is, you've said that this population is currently being served quite well in DOC. What does that mean?
What
does
I
that
mean
look like?
is that there are good people in DOC too, that, the correctional staff is a professional staff. And I shouldn't speak to them, John should speak to them, but that they care deeply about their work. They work very, very hard. The idea of pulling them out is if that there's something negative about their presence in the security realm.
That's not
There
what
is-
we're saying. Excuse me.
Okay.
I've got to interrupt here. That is not what we're saying. We want an appropriate setting for folks who are in a terrible place in their life. And when we read S-193 as it came over from the Senate, having these folks under the custody of corrections raises a lot of red flags in this body, not just here in this committee, but in other committees as well. There's a lot that happens with a person under the custody of corrections. So we're automatically putting the folks into an incarcerative environment when they really have more of a health issue.
But we're
Whether it's
using it.
DEI or whether it's a mental health issue or dementia, we're criminalizing that type of situation through putting them under the custody of the Commissioner of
So I
Corrections.
appreciate.
In this piece of legislation, it was the language that was there about someone being housed in a correctional facility. It said it would be a therapeutic residential type facility within a correctional facility. That's pretty contradictory.
So that's what would have to be created by bringing in the whole clinical piece of this. And I wanted to say one other thing, because I really appreciate what you're saying. I do, and I understand it. I think that we're also saying that if we don't sort of move on this, what we're doing is letting those folks sit there right now. They've been sitting there right now without this, right? And so those folks, again, are not getting their due process.
So let me interrupt, Commissioner. Of those folks who are sitting there, how many of them are held without bail? And how many of them also have an offense that's punishable by life imprisonment?
I don't have that specific information for you. I know that there are individuals who do fit both those criteria, but I couldn't tell you exactly how many. What I can say is that I take issue with the idea that these people have had their mental illness criminalized. Their acts are criminal. These are people who have murdered. That is why they are in this
They were
population.
charged with that. And the question is, if they're
Currently-
competent to understand that.
That is an issue. But they are with us now, and what this bill envisions doesn't correct that at all. Because they will either still be with us or they will not, and then they will be out. I
That's not true
urge you.
either. That's not true. They're not either with you or out in the community. We're envisioning a forensics facility.
I understand that vision is a long time away. What will we do with these individuals who are currently in our custody, accused of these crimes, credibly accused, and in some instances, not even really arguing that the crime has occurred?
Right?
What will happen to these individuals?
That's contemplated too. Within the instructions for the plan, that is contemplated.
I also take note that this was not about saying that corrections was not about expressing a lack of confidence in the people of corrections. I will inform you that that is how members of the corrections department have read the repeated references in this to keep it as far away from corrections as possible. That is a recurring theme that's in this. And that recurring language that is, I mean, there are at least 4 instances of it, do not put it in corrections, is interpreted as that, particularly when, again, individuals fitting these circumstances have been and are in our custody at this very moment.
We want to take care of these folks in an appropriate setting. That's our concern.
I think I'm struggling, like we're talking about, people have a right to their due process, right? But in the bill, only the people who have committed these types of crimes are getting their due process, right? Tens of people every year are incompetent to stand trial in Vermont, but we have no vision for them. We did in 2018. The same AHS came to us and said, we need a 50-bed facility to accommodate this population. And now it's shrunk. And I think I need somebody to tell me why this is the most dangerous population. I'm not a doctor, but everything I've read said somebody's propensity to be dangerous to the public isn't based on what they were sentenced of. It should be their clinical diagnosis of how dangerous they are once they get out there. And I don't know why the bill is structured just black and white of what you're sentenced with, as opposed to a doctor sitting down and saying this person who's been a stalker, this person who is a serial aggravated assaulter is going to be more dangerous than maybe somebody who committed a domestic crime. But at the moment, they're not as dangerous as one of the other categories. So why is it the small population and not based on the clinical diagnosis?
Because they do represent such a high risk to the community, and because it is an avenue to get this going, right? So if you think that this should be broader than it is, then that's what you should, then that's what you're saying. You're saying, I think this should be broader than it is. But what we're saying is, this is the population that we have concern about lots of populations. We have a concern about this population. We have a concern, the community has a concern. We have the responsibility for both people that we serve who are finding themselves in this scenario. And also we have a responsibility to the public. This particular population is one of, so we bring this to you, right? This bill for this population to at least move that forward for this group with the most heinous of crimes to have both the security that can be provided through corrections as well as the clinical piece that doesn't exist right now. So if we have that for this population, that will be making a huge difference for the people we're all concerned about, both those who are in the communities, the victims and the families of victims who have been arguing and supporting, trying to move something like this through, the people who want a chance to have their day in court, or families of people who want to have their loved one have a chance at due process, but need to have this support in order to have a chance of being found competent in this, facing this level of charges with the potential for a life sentence. This gives a path for these people that they don't currently have in a setting that we're infusing with therapeutic approaches. I've worked in these settings. I can tell you that they make a difference. I can tell you that regardless of whether it's in a correctional setting with correctional officers providing security and clinical people providing clinical, or you have it in some facility elsewhere, it depends on what happens inside the facility, not the facility itself. I have seen wonderful work go on where you're side by side with corrections. And I have seen challenging work go on in places where the corrections are not present. It's about how you build what happens inside and who you're standing next to. So there are a number of reasons why what we brought or what this administration brought was framed in this way. This is something we can do. This is something that is actually feasible. What you're talking about is for a much larger population, and maybe that requires more conversation. But if we stop this now, the people, there's a cost of doing nothing or a cost of slowing it down because those folks are still there.
I'm worried, are we being honest with the public? Is what somebody is accused of synonymous to what their level of danger is to the public? Or is that better decided by a doctor who's evaluating them? Because if it feels like we're going to put a press release and say, we're taking care of the most heinous offenders here. And it's not honest because there could be somebody else who's way more dangerous than somebody who fits in this category. And what's going to happen is they're going to commit a crime and then we're going to come back and we're going to build a bigger facility on this.
Or we're going to put more people in a correctional facility.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, so I see where you're at with that, but I just want to just say something that I think is just important to say, which is that the kinds of crimes we're talking about here are really so heinous that they, it's rape of children, it's murder. The outcomes of these are so heinous. Now, that's not to say that there aren't other people who are dangerous and that we don't have tools. We do have tools to assess the risk of recidivism or the risk of the dangerous level. And these would be incorporated here so that people aren't, just released out without having work being done before they're released to mitigate that risk to the public. It does not say that there aren't people. It would be a doctor here evaluating this population, a clinician of doing risk assessments that would help to determine for this population the outcomes and the impact on our communities of folks charged with this level of crime. It's clear. I just want to make sure that I say that. Yeah, thank you.
So Commissioner Hawes, you had your hand up. Do you still want to weigh in? Do you dare?
Well, I was going to make just a quick comment. You had asked a question about why can't we do competency restoration now? And that is because we have not been approved to have a competency restoration program. Simple as that. We don't have it here.
And who would need to give that approval?
Yep.
Who would need to give that approval? The legislative branch to set up a process?
Yep.
Has
And
that
that's why
been,
it is embedded as a major component to this particular group of individuals who are currently in corrections and who've been charged with, as Dr. Bowen has said, the most heinous of crimes. And so that is a group that we are looking at supporting with this. And we have brought back numerous proposals in a variety of different ways to the legislative body to address and support folks who have been charged with crimes and who may have other diagnostic challenges going on for them. And this is a small group of folks who are currently being served in a correctional setting in a collaborative way with the treatment providers in the system. And that's why 193 has come to you all to make this decision.
so I know one of our committees has a lot of concern about the IDD,
Intellectual disability.
intellectual disabilities. What's the process now for someone who's in our incarcerative setting, who's not competent, may not be competent to stand trial, but it's IDD? What's the process now?
So that falls under Dale. So the intellectual disabilities population and the developmental disabilities population are not exactly the same thing. Those with intellectual disabilities do have Act 248, and I think what you're referencing. So if you meet the criteria for intellectual disability and you are found not competent, and you have a certain, some level of dangerousness associated with what you were accused of, you could be placed by the court into basically my custody, the custody of the commissioner of Dale.
So would that happen for a person who is incarcerated? So if a person's being incarcerated on a charge and they're not, in the court has ordered them to see if they could regain, if they could be restored to competency. And they're evaluated and cannot. And it's an IDD person, what's the next process?
In this,
Next step?
through this bill you're talking about,
No, currently,
currently there is no restoration process.
that we know.
Okay.
So the person, there would be an evaluation of that person while they're incarcerated.
If they're determined to be not competent and they meet all the other criteria and the court requests that they could be in Act 248.
But how do they give, I've got the scenario, they are in a incarcerated bed. And it's been determined the competency restoration is not possible. What happens now?
Now, there is no determination that competency is not possible. It's just if they're determined to be not competent, the court can order them into Act 248. There hasn't been someone who's been admitted in the last 5 years.
Act 248?
That had a life, that was facing a life
Oh,
sentence.
yeah, I'm sorry, yes, there hasn't been anyone who would otherwise meet the
This
this
criteria.
criteria.
I'm not talking about this.
Okay, but
Right
currently,
now,
if they're found
court-
not competent
Right.
and they have intellectual disability and the court so requests that they can come into the custody.
So they could move from an incarcerated setting, IDD folks could move where the court has determined they're not competent to stand trial.
You want to say who you are? Do you want to say who
Through
you are?
Act 248 out of a correctional facility?
So if I could, I'm Jen Garabedian, I'm the Developmental Disability Services Division Director. So operationally, what you're talking about is generally how it happens. Somebody commits or is charged with committing a crime. They're held with or without bail. Often they can't make bail if there is bail. So they're held in DOC custody. We work together during that process, and then the state's attorney gets involved with our counsel and determine that Act 248 is the appropriate route. And then a designated program through our community provider is developed. During that time, though, often they remain in DOC custody.
For how long?
That depends. All of our programming, regardless of criminal justice involvement, is individualized. And so the length of time to develop any program varies. But it can be a time of weeks if the individual is already known for community provider, or
Can't be much longer.
It could be a year and
It can be
a
as
half.
long as
Been in-
necessary.
Yeah.
It can be as long as it is necessary for both the state's attorney and the defense attorney and the judge ultimately to come to the realization that this competency situation is not going to evolve. And they can have any number of bites at that apple, as it were, in the meantime. The first one is often not enough for a vigorous prosecutor to accept and says, well, let's wait a bit and see if we can, if stabilization in the incarcerative situation is enough to bring this person back, but there isn't a process for it. It's just it's basically away from the stressful moment at which the alleged crime occurred. Can the person self-resolve on some level? And sometimes there is an understanding that no, the carcerative setting, absent additional therapy, isn't going to help with that. In fact, may aggravate it. But we don't know what happens with the therapy situation here in Vermont because we don't provide it. Other states do, and do in fact achieve progress for those individuals, competency for those individuals, and then the person can proceed with his or her due process. That is what we are attempting to do here for this small subset. And to the extent that it is a small subset and not a much larger group, it is because past efforts to make it apply to larger groups have not been successful. And this was an effort to focus in on a smaller population whose situations were understood to be, obviously not universally, but at least more widely believed to be serious and deserving of custody while the process unfolds. And again, I would say too that a person who has been credibly accused of murdering another person is going to be someone that we as a society have and will continue to pay more attention to than even a person who has been repetitively assaultive when those assaults have not led to death.
So where are we, folks? Committee?
Alice, you said earlier today that you thought that a couple of the groups that were involved in this were kind of on the same page. I'm hearing 3 right now that aren't anywhere even close to what we're thinking.
I'm talking about the legislative, and I wasn't talking about the administration. I was talking about the committees here. That's who I was talking about. I wasn't talking about the administration. Yeah. That's the
Sorry.
250th birthday.
Sorry.
Troy.
My frustration right now remains at what I am hearing as an unwillingness to envision a forensics facility that is not housed in a correctional facility. That's frustrating to me. I think we can. I'm being told by folks around the room that it's not possible, that this is a non-start. That's what I'm hearing. Those are my words. That to me is incredibly frustrating. I think we can create a forensics facility that is not under the jurisdiction of or staffed by the Department of Corrections. But it's unfortunate that the administration is telling us that that's not possible.
I think what we would, I mean, I don't think that we're saying that, I think we're saying that that can't happen in any reasonable time frame that would address the immediate problem. Again, this is a very narrow group of folks we're talking about who are currently already in, they're already incarcerated.
And that's not going to change as this works out. And the forensics plan asks you to consider whether I'm going to quote it, whether any opportunities exist for out-of-state placement of the forensic facility populations in clinically appropriate programming while developing a forensic facility in Vermont is pending. If we do nothing, if this bill dies, you're still going to be housing those folks. I think that's unacceptable. I think it is acceptable for us to envision a facility that is central to the treatment of and the restoration of the competency of these folks so that they can have their day in court. We're asking you to consider ways that we might temporarily house these folks out of state. You might come back and say that's not possible. Then we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. I am hearing an unwillingness to consider a plan that is not governed by the Department of Corrections. That plan is not acceptable to me. I wouldn't vote for that sort of bill. I am one person in a committee of 11 right now. We are 11 people in a chamber of 150. So my one vote may end up not mattering, but I'm incredibly frustrated by what I've heard today as what I'm perceiving to be a pretty significant unwillingness to move at all from the Senate's version.
I don't think, we certainly don't want you to be frustrated.
I am.
Hear that you are. Yep, hear that you are. I think what our concern is that these folks will continue to sit there.
My concern as
That's
well.
our concern is
What
what
the feasibility plan is at least 2 years, and who knows really what would happen.
It'll be
during
4
that.
if we don't do something.
Well, but we if we don't do anything right now, these folks are gonna continue to be, the current state is so concerning to us.
Me too.
Right, so we want to move on the current state in the way that we think is a reasonable way to do this for this narrow group of folks charged with these most heinous of crimes. That's what we're asking for right now, is just the okay to go forward with this, because it will make it better than it is.
That helps.
I'm in the same place I was.
Brian?
I don't know which commissioner it's a better question for, but this goes back to this population, what's happening with them right now. You know, there was the statement that they're being served quite well by and in DOC. Then there's a statement that is very concerning, what's going on right now. And so I guess to get more clarity on what's being said, what else would be offered if this were to be taken up other than competency restoration? Is this population being offered anything else? I don't know. Who
So,
it's for.
again, this is a very small population. I don't know exactly who among our current incarcerated individuals would absolutely be applicable to this, in that I know that we have individuals accused of crimes that meet these standards. I know, based on reporting and publicly available reporting, that those crimes contain elements that lend themselves to the likelihood that these individuals will either seek to contest competency and or to seek an insanity defense should competency ultimately be achieved. But I don't know their exact status at this moment. I'm not necessarily privy to that, even in our setting. That those are attorney decisions and court decisions, et cetera. And so those don't factor into our housing of these individuals. We house them based on their current conduct. We understand what they are accused of, or in the case of people sentenced, what they've been sentenced for, because that can be a component of a risk assessment. But we also can look at past history, especially if that past history is directly with us, either in our system or under our supervision. And those will all determine where we place people. There are individuals who fit the standards I just laid out, crimes that meet these standards, likelihood based on press coverage of being either incompetent or seeking an insanity defense, who are in our alpha unit, which is for people with significant mental health issues. For the most part, are displaying that. It's very secure. It's a lockdown. There's not a lot of interaction for those individuals with others. They are relatively segregated. There are some who are in general population and are therefore more free and able to move and go out and be in the yard. Last week was National Correctional Officers Week. I visited all 6 facilities. I walked the yard in each of them. The day I happened to be in Southern State, which is likely where individuals like this would be, happened to be a beautiful day, and everybody was out in the yard moving around if they were in the general population. And that included some individuals who could conceivably be affected by this bill. What are we doing for them? Well, as with anyone who is not yet sentenced, our ability to provide programming is limited, owing to the fact that when you are detained, we are never certain how long you're going to be with us. In these cases, and people who are in these situations without the issue of competency or without the issue of an insanity defense, people who are credibly accused of murder, they're often with us for quite a number of years before their sentencing. And yet we're not able to give them all the kinds of programming that we might otherwise. That's something I'd like to investigate a little bit more, but that is what it is right now. Because most of the time a detainee person is not with us that long. And therefore, starting on the road to a high school education is challenging for somebody who's only going to be with us for a week or less even. But we do provide them all other things. In all other respects, they get medical care, they get the same access to various things like our tablets and our libraries, et cetera. For an individual of this, if we were to add this service to this narrow group, then we would actually begin certain kinds of processes for these folks. We'd give them this one form of programming would be for them, despite the fact that they were still detainees, and they would be able to attend therapeutic sessions, one-on-one, maybe group, around both the nature of whatever it is that may be affecting their competency, also civics courses in order to understand the process. As Commissioner Bowen has said, it is, the notion of competency is a legal distinction, not a medical distinction. It is diagnostic agnostic, and therefore it may very well not be about whether or not the person is mentally ill or whether or not they have a TBI. It could be some combination thereof. It could be something different. Could be that the individual in attempting to hypothetically murder her family also did so with a carbon monoxide poisoning and ultimately was unable to, affected, was rescued prior to death. The other members of the family died, but this person now has intellectual impairment owing to the carbon monoxide.
So I'm gonna just weigh in here because I have the experience as I'm a clinical psychologist by training, but I spent 9 years as a forensic psychologist, and I ran competency services and worked with the population that were incarcerated and needed competency restoration. And so all of the things the Commissioner Murad is saying is accurate. The kinds of interventions which can be focused on competency restoration will be different depending on what some of the issues are that are preventing the person from regaining that competence, or for some with developmental disabilities have never achieved competence and to try to help them achieve it. So there are very specific methods and approaches to it. For mental health, it might include medication, it might include therapy, it might include the kind of services that somebody would get to stabilize their mental health exacerbation for the acute episode that they may be experiencing. If it's somebody with developmental disabilities, there is a particular methodology that has been employed that is an evidence-informed approach. Some will achieve competence and some will not achieve competence. If they don't achieve competence, you're also talking about the work that a lot of the work that goes into risk mitigation is around things like anger management and coping strategies and developing skills that decrease the risk of somebody being a danger to the community or to others.
Well, and so that sort of goes to part of my question, which is if the bill were to pass as the Senate had it, then this small population would be offered these services to restore competency. These other things that you're talking about now could be offered to anyone anyway in the current situation, could they not?
But this is specifically tied to being able to go from non-restorability into the next step, right? So it's really about those who are not, it's really about filling the gap around competence. And then what comes from either restoring competence for these folks who are not currently restorable is due process, and accountability. And what happens for those who are non-restorable? What depends on the risk that they pose to the community, right? So now they've been determined to be non-restorable. You're in a different setting than some different place for your understanding of individuals than you were when they were determined to be not competent, but there was no effort to determine if they're non-restorable or restorable. So once you've determined that, they're never going to become restored. It's very unlikely they will ever be restorable. So you have now hit a wall and you need to be able to create the path. And the risk assessments are that path.
And so in the absence of the legislation as it came out of the Senate, are any of these things that you talk about unable to happen right now?
I'm aware of them happening in that kind of a setting where you're going to competency restoration, determination of non-competence, and then risk. There may be risk assessments that are done, but this is really a structured program that has, I see this, I'm a visual person, so I do see this as, like a flow chart, right? And so we don't have the step one of this process. We don't have step one. Step one would be, can we work towards competency restoration?
If I may, sir, I think there's a component there. There's two pieces. One is we're not budgeted for those services, but the more important piece is the reason we're not budgeted for them is that we're not authorized to provide those services, much less compel them. And services such as these would really have to be, the default would be that you're going to participate in these. And if you don't, then you'll just continue to be held until you do. And then at some point, there is going to be assessments in each stage that say, well, again, maybe the lack of participation or the incomplete participation is actually a factor of the inability ever to restore competency for this particular individual. But still, there needs to be an authority that says this is a service that is provided and is somewhat compulsory. It's not the same as, for example, offering high school education or sex offender treatment, all of which are not participating in those can extend your sentence in the sense that you will not be released at your minimum if you're not participating in programming that's designed to make you safer, but it can't extend your sentence past the maximum. So therefore it is voluntary. Don't want to do it, don't do it. And then just wait for your max and out you go. This is something that we need to have a little bit more authority in a legislative sense to say, this is the expectation is there will be participation in this in order to keep our due process moving forward.
And in alignment with what this committee is discussing, we would expect that to be a therapeutic environment.
And to be governed again by the least restrictive assessment possible. Once, if a person cannot be restored, then there's going to be a risk assessment about the behavior, including the behavior that's been displayed during the incarcerative period. And it's going to be governed by, as all things are, the least restrictive, which could involve moving to a facility that is outside of corrections. Could involve perhaps nothing at some stage, if it's depending on how long it has gone.
You have another question, Colin?
Yeah, I just need help understanding why corrections needs to be the one providing the security in this. I'm looking at the Vermont Psychiatric Hospital. I would say many of the people we envisioned for this facility at one time would have been residents of that hospital when they were in a more like floridly, like psychotic, like acute state than they would be when they're in this facility. And DMH seems to do a great job. And it seems like it's a different mentality too, with how they provide security with like no pain takedown trainings, sort of trauma informed, as opposed to DOC, when the frontline DOC staff is coming in and saying, we are not qualified to do this. So I'm just wondering, why does it have to be corrections? Why can't mental health do it? Why can't another department do it?
Thank you for that question. I really do appreciate it. And I can say again, I'm going to draw on my experience because I spent a couple of decades working in acute psychiatric hospitals and I ran them. And I can tell you that it is different. And the reason for somebody to be hospitalized for a psychiatric condition is a very specific thing. And for these folks currently incarcerated, if they needed psychiatric hospital level, they would have to go to the psychiatric hospital. And so if they don't meet that criteria for psychiatric hospitalization, they should not be in a clinical setting that they don't meet the criteria for. Okay, and we're not saying that these folks are going to meet the criteria. If they did, they would be in the hospital. A hospital stay is a short stay. These are not long stays in the hospital. They would, with the types of medications, the types of treatments, and the types of interventions that we have, they would be released because they no longer meet the criteria. The very strict criteria for hospitalization is that you're dangerous to yourself or others. And of course, once you come in there and you start to, receive the appropriate treatment regimens, you are going to, most people will no longer meet those criteria. The type of training for people with mental illness, and again, these are not necessarily people who are charged with any kind of crime or have committed any kind of crime. You don't want to, mental health is not criminalized, right? It's just that they need some level of containment in order to provide the treatment for them. The type of training is different. It's a different kind of training that you have to address people who have mental illness. And the types of interventions are very specific to the type of mental illness that they are challenged with. And I'm sorry that Emily needed to step off, but there is a limit to how many people you can have in a psychiatric hospital. There's different rules around the Medicaid or the medication. There's IMD issues. There's a whole slew of issues that would not make that the setting for something like this. Also, it's not a mental health specific issue, the issue that we have brought to you. It is, well, he's used my term agnostic. It's diagnostic agnostic in the sense that these are legal terms and the diagnosis can run kind of the gamut. And so mental health setting is certainly not an appropriate setting for this. It might not be an appropriate setting for most of the people we're talking about here. It might be for an occasional person, but they would come into the hospital if they met that need and that criteria. Right? So it's.
Yeah, and I'm not saying they should be in the Vermont Psychiatric Hospital. What I'm saying is when the folks envisioned for this facility get really bad, they could go there. And the DMH staff seems up to the task in taking care of them security wise. So couldn't we envision psych techs planted in a facility that's not a hospital, but is a very different skill set than a correctional officer who says, okay, I did a few hours of training on this, but they're telling us, we don't want this. VSEA's come in. I've spoken to frontline correction staff. They've said, we don't want this. We're understaffed already. You're putting more on us.
Respectfully, that we're not. Again, these are people that are already in our custody. An orderly at a mental health facility that is not within a correctional department has no specialized training with regard to the therapy provided to the individuals in their custody. Our job in the correctional system is to facilitate the movement or lack thereof of people in a safe and compassionate way. But the therapeutic aspect of this programming would be provided by experts. Those experts would be a new staff, as I've said before, in all likelihood provided by WellPath, although perhaps we'd have to create a secondary contract with another provider if that's what it came to. But regardless, they wouldn't be DOC employees directly. They would be contractors, and they would be overseen in the new versions of this by somebody who would be a medical director associated with AHS, not only with DOC. There are elements there that have struck members of DOC as a concern that these new authorities would be misused by DOC to keep people in our custody longer. Nothing is further from the case. Our job is not to keep people with us longer. It's to maintain the safety of the community, of the people who are given to us by the courts and our staff. This doesn't change any of that because, again, these individuals are already with us. If anything, it minimizes the likelihood of dangers to safety by providing more opportunity for these individuals to stabilize and improve.
And it's not the wider group. I think you keep going back to this is a narrow, this has been brought to you in this way because it is this narrow group of people we're talking about.
So it's expedient because the folks are already there and it's narrow. So it's really expedient to get out there and say we've taken care of folks who are in the forensic world. When what we've looked at in this committee is knowing when we make a big decision to go forward to create a forensic facility for the state of Vermont, which will be the first time. Committee is not opposed to a forensic facility. We want to do it right. That's the issue. We want to do it right. We want to have the appropriate agency or departments overseeing it and providing the restorative services within that building. That's where we're coming from. And I can tell you there's a lot of other members in the House who have a lot of concern with it being under the custody of the Corrections, Department of Corrections. And we're trying to thread a needle here that we feel quite strongly that folks who may not be able to restore competency, that they're in an environment that is healthy for them and supportive for them. Because we have a responsibility as the state to take care of them.
You agree wholeheartedly.
And the question is to put them in an incarcerative setting under the custody of corrections. There's some folks in this building flies in the face of that. So we're looking at it long-term, not what's expedient. Yes, we've got a few people who are incarcerated right now So that's being used as just justification for this. And we're looking at it as a bigger picture, saying, let's do it, but let's do it right. That's where we are. If I'm off base, the committee members speak up. That's the conversation that we've had here. James and Joe and then Kevin.
So something I said twice, and I know I only said it twice because I didn't feel like it was being picked up, and I'm not going to beat my head against the wall, is the original bill is fine with me as long as there's a provision that says we're going to do X in the future. The goal that many of us have of a facility that's different. At the same time, then, like, internet research is internet research, right? Like I always say, like, field trips have a purpose because you get to see things. I don't know what any of these facilities in other states look like in practice. I do know what the internet tells me on a regular basis. Most of them are in DOC, but they're also mostly their own links, right? They're not intermixed. And what I read, I don't know, I am not a clinical psychologist. I'm not going to pretend I am. But I know that it says that being a general population, generally speaking, is not considered best practice. So I have lots and lots of different questions about where we go in this. But one thing that I can say is that I've tried to listen to everybody. And on both sides of the issue, I sense some equal willingness to listen to both sides. And I've also sensed I have my position and anything anybody else says is wrong. That's not going to help in this situation. So I'm watching. We're going to see where it goes. But if I could go back to James ruling the world for a minute, I would say the original bill for right this second would be fine with that provision that says, hey, we're going to seriously, we're going to look and say within X number of years, we're having this facility. And it's not an option. You're going in this direction, so I don't think we should hold up the world for perfection, but I also think that provision has to be there to because a lot of people have concerns. I mean, legitimate concerns. Like, well, if we do this, well, is it just going to be like, okay, well, it's taken care of and let's put it under the rug? I'm worried about that, but how we do it, I don't know. And whether, anyway, I'll leave it there, I guess.
Joe, Kevin, and Mary.
I'm in a similar place to where James is. So I think the bill as it came from the Senate creates a better, although far from ideal situation relative to where we are now. But I would concur that we should work toward something better. But to strip what the Senate version envisions entirely means that we have only the status quo in best case scenario until the first quarter of 2028. And in reality, that's probably never going to happen. It'd essentially be relegating the thing to a study for all intents and purposes. So I would be more amenable to some language that preserves the Senate's intent and just to echo James's sentiments, working toward something that is truly more therapeutic for the subject individuals and maybe a broader spectrum of folks other than those who, were they competent, could be facing up to a life sentence for what they purportedly did, and almost certainly did do. Highly likely they did commit.
Kevin and then Mary.
And I'm going to piggyback on here. I would like to see us do something that adds the ability for DOC to provide services to not only this small segment, but the larger population that needs therapeutic. But we need it now while we're putting a plan together for 2-3 years from now. Because right now, we're doing something. But apparently we don't have legislation that tells us what we're doing. So I'd like to see us legitimize it by adding these services for therapeutic. We can put together a plan for 3 years from now for something else better, but I don't see us kicking the can down the road for another 3 years while we're studying it. Who knows who will be here in 3 years to approve $250 million facility.
I think my concern is that when, and I'm sorry if you have a hard time hearing me, it's my allergies, is when the discussion started, as it came back to us, DOC said they could do this with no extra money. It was all taken care of. And I thought, well, to add therapeutic and other items onto this to make this really work as a forensic facility, not only for, possibly still in the correctional center facility. I don't know how you would not need resources and funding to do that and to improve upon what has been going on. And I think that really sent a very negative statement to us, kind of like, well, how do you just kind of say you can do this? Because I think all of us sitting around here know it does take resources and funding and other things to make something work. So I think that was probably one of the, and maybe it was a misstatement that was made, but it was said to all of us. And I think that's why, not the only reason, but I think that's why we tried to head a different direction. And as for the staff, we meant no disrespect at all to any of the staff that's taking care of or is overseeing the individuals that are in our correctional facilities. If anything, we applaud their efforts, but are they put in a situation that's not appropriate either? Or are they even trained to do what they need to do with the population they're dealing with? So I think, at this point, just hearing kind of everything, I mean, I look at some tweaks to this, but I'm not sure where the rest of the committees want to go. But I do think we do need to not pretend that we're not going to need the resources or funds to do this.
I apologize if that was the impression that I gave. I hope that what I said, and I would certainly be willing to look back, is that as envisioned, what this is an additional layer of therapy that would require an amendment to our WellPath contract, or as I said today, for the first time, honestly today, maybe WellPath wouldn't be able to provide the service and we'd have to go to yet another provider. And that would require additional money. So what I said, I hope that I'm remembering it correctly, is that I did not envision that being a lot, because we are talking about a very small population, and it would really be additional 1 or 2 staff members of WellPath providing this narrow service, probably not even full-time, in the sense that these individuals, when they're with us, they might need it on a recurring basis, but there are times where no one in this status may be with us, and that is a relatively low resource. The notion that we would need additional staff in a correctional setting, I do not believe is the case, absent a vision that it has to be separate, as for example, the direction of the planned assessment for January 2027 clearly is pushing for. That would all require tremendous outlays of resources, tremendous. But as envisioned by the S-193 that came out of the Senate, this was a add-on to services currently provided, that is WellPath services currently provided, a new service provided by them for a very small population that really would be a relatively small increase in our maybe a BAA, or maybe and then a small change to what ends up being our FY29 budget.
The important thing is that providers that come in have the experience, the skill, the knowledge to provide the appropriate evidence-informed approaches.
And is that $200,000 or $5 million? I don't know, but those are not the same as saying we're going to build a new facility that is going to run us tens of, if not more, millions of dollars.
So let me just put this on the table when folks, committee members are saying that we don't want to wait any longer. We don't want to kick the can down the road. We want to do it quickly. Both versions, this S-193 came over from the Senate, and the version of our amendment that we're working on, as well as the rest of the bill, doesn't take effect until January 1st, 28. So regardless where we are, if you house them in a correctional facility with treatment, or you house them in a forensic, if the correctional facility is termed the forensic unit, forensic facility, or you house it somewhere else, none of that takes effect until January 1st, 28. So either way, you're talking the same time frame.
there's nothing to build here. It's a plan, it's an internal plan, the difference. This is something that we would be starting to plan the implementation. The timelines, I don't see them lightning up the thing. This is the reality of it. We don't have a site, we don't have the space, we don't have the skill set, we don't have, so I just.
You're saying that you do right now because they're in corrections. You just said that
Right.
you have the space right now.
Yeah.
In corrections.
I'm
right.
saying the two paths would diverge, right? This would be, if we got your, okay, we got the legislature's go on this, even if you're planning to do something bigger and better. It would be, we would be in, we would be heading into things like rulemaking and the next steps would be putting together that and doing rulemaking. We would be further down towards operationalization and implementation than we would be if we were starting to talk about something quite different than using resources that we have. And we're just, really concerned that that appears to be beyond what we could do and start to do right now. The idea of a vision, we actually do appreciate the vision that you're talking about. We're not appreciating that vision. I think what we're concerned about is that this will just stop in its tracks, and we're worried about it. We're quite worried about that, because what we think the current state is right now could be better. Obviously could be better, and the bigger vision for the betterer vision is fantastic, but getting to in the press conference, the governor said that don't let perfection be the enemy of good. I like that phrase. I've used it myself from time to time, but I think that's what we're talking about, which is not that you don't keep striving for perfection, but would we be doing that here with this?
I guess I'll just ask, is this being pitched as an interim plan or the end game?
It wasn't, it was just pictured as what it was. Like there have been other things that have been tried over the years. I haven't been here, so I haven't been part of those. But there are other plans that have been tried, and I think that they didn't manifest. So this is an effort that has merit. This is an effort that has merit that can really make a difference. I worry particularly about people who are charged with a crime, especially in the developmental disabilities world, who, folks who are vulnerable. They're more likely to be victims than they are to be perpetrators. They are easily manipulated and could end up having their liberty restricted without an opportunity to due process. And I worry about that every minute that those folks are in there. And so the idea of having that opportunity is very appealing to me. Just creating it in space where we can create it, stand it up, means that they get a chance. And that could be up to 50% of those folks who get a chance to even have a day in court, and either they're accountable for what happened or they're not. And then they don't have a life where they have their liberty restricted in ways that impact the quality of their life going forward. So there's more to this than just.
Yeah, I guess I look at that 2018 plan and I really like it. The 50-bed facility. It's a great vision. I think trying to encompass people with SFI needs and people who need competency restoration outside those higher degree crimes there. So I think I would feel better if the administration would say, that's the end game, but this is the path to get it here. This isn't the right plan. This is the right now plan. So I don't know if there's any, is the commitment still that 50-bed facility like AHS thought it was the right way to go in 2018?
I don't know, 2018, that was before the pandemic was different. Well, I have no idea the answer to that question. I just don't have any idea. But you know, if that was approved then and people had gone, we would have probably a terrific facility in Vermont. So what can I say? This is the moment for something. I wish that was the moment. Then I would have come here to Vermont. You already would have had this set up and it could have really made a difference.
We've got to be also realistic because a 50-bed facility like this, you see the facilities and discussions we have in this committee. Things have not been happening for a long time and won't be happening for a long time.
Yep.
So we can't fool ourselves that this is going to be an immediate fix.
Thank you, ma'am. We are desperate for a new women's facility. We have 150 men who are out of state because we don't have room for them here.
You're talking to the converted
Yes,
over.
ma'am.
I just want to say
The land.
one more thing. I think just might be helpful, like the kind of facility I think that you're envisioning, which has merit with a larger population, right? This population, this narrow population, just doesn't need a large facility, right? This is a 5-6 people maybe. In a year, I think we have one person with developmental disabilities. You know, maybe we talk about a small population, so we don't need a whole big facility at this time, but this population that we have brought to you for consideration, just to put that into some perspective as well.
And when you've brought this to the policy committees for healthcare and human services, what's their reaction?
We have not seen what you have put together.
No, I mean, this has been going around. This has been in the House here for 2.5, 3 weeks. So I'm assuming you've testified upstairs to human services as well as healthcare.
It was a different conversation than what you're talking about here. It was just a different kind of conversation.
I believe Representative Casey was at the one hearing that I attended, and which I testified on.
Yeah, I mean, it was a higher level conversation, I would say. I think 4 commissioners in an hour and a half testified, so.
Yeah, and I think we were earlier maybe in the process, and so there were just a lot of questions about what it could look like, what is that kind of what goes into the competency training. So it was a different level of conversation.
Was there any concern on any of their parts up there that you heard about being in corrections and under the custody of corrections?
Yes. My understanding was those were minority voices when I did it in front of judiciary and again in front of.
I don't think it's.
Well, that was how I understood it, as far as those who were vocal about it. And it was my judiciary was relatively early after the transfer from the Senate, and then one with Representative Casey was somewhat more recent, but that was probably 3 weeks ago now, is it not?
Week before last.
Yeah, a couple of weeks.
I think there was a difference also in terms of having folks in the community versus having folks in an institution. That was a conversation point in some of the. That's a different conversation of what we're having.
Kim, did you want to weigh in? You had your hand up.
Yes,
No, yes and
I'm
no?
not a commissioner, so I did not want to insert myself into this conversation, but we were listed to testify today, so that was like. Speak for a few minutes at some point.
So we've been at this for 2 hours. And we've just been going round and round and round. And not getting off anywhere. So I don't know how to proceed.
Chair, part of my comments would be a suggestion.
Identify yourself for the record.
Do you mind if I actually, can I sit?
Yes,
Feels funny to sit on the side.
Yeah.
thank you.
We can hear you better from there.
Yeah, here we go. Excuse me. For the record, Kim McManus with the Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs. To the question, Representative Casey, of, did we see this as an end all? From our department's perspective, no, this was not an end all be all. We have never said that this was going to solve all the problems out there. We helped draft the original bill to start a forensic facility, to get the process started, to figure it out. and then would want to expand it as appropriate. For the limited purpose of this population, we thought this is feasible, like in the foreseeable future, if it's in the Department of Corrections. It was asked earlier, how many individuals do we know right now would fall into this definition? Just looking at homicides, did not have time to look at sexual assaults or kidnapping, but just homicides, we have currently 7 pending cases. 1 out of Wyndham, Rutland, Bennington, Orleans, Chittenden, Franklin, and Washington County that are charged homicides, that the people are being held without bail, and they have a mental health component to their case. Either they are litigating competency, have been found incompetent, and we are continuing to litigate competency, or they have raised insanity as a defense. Or both, they've had competency issues and then raised insanity as a defense, as a very notable case in the news, if you've been reading the news the past week. For those individuals, we do think there's a path forward, and I really appreciated the notion of a 2-step plan, and that is what we wanted to suggest today, that our pushback on your recommendations is only that it's completely sliced out Department of Corrections from, and includes asking for a feasibility plan. What we wanted to suggest to the committee today is to soften your language around the Department of Corrections. The testimony and what you all have said has been very clear in all the rooms that nobody wants Department of Corrections to be the end-all be-all of this facility. And there's been a lot of movement and change on that in House Judiciary, naming the other commissioners, naming the medical director of the Agency of Human Services. And I think there's a path forward to balance the concerns that have been raised, and especially if this is worded as the first step. And then there's what's the next step for this larger facility or separate facility. And if the language is softened for the recommendations for the feasibility plan, that you would like that plan to include with the Department of Corrections and without it, and be able to have a side-by-side comparison, I think you all will be able to make a better, more informed choice when you come back next year. I think without seeing those 2 options side by side, with the cost, with the human resources, with the timing for implementation, both, as Chair said, we have till 2028 either way. I think we can all recognize that without Department of Corrections as as a partner in some way, whether it's in the internal forensic facility or as partner for the supervision for those who are released from the facility, AHS is not going to be able to put up a reasonable, what ticks all the boxes here by 2028. Involving Department of Corrections, we feel there is actually a path to have something by 2028, and maybe it's not the end-all be-all, but we can have 2 paths going forward. One that is addressing, because the concern for us, and we definitely do not want folks sitting in corrections forever, but these 7 individuals, not all of them, but some of them are going to be released because they are found incompetent, and eventually they have to be released because they cannot be held pending their trial. And they will be in the 7 communities I just named with no risk, thank you, with no risk mitigation services or limited to no supervision. And that's our immediate concern. Those are the folks we don't want just walking out. So we absolutely appreciate wanting the bigger plan. And as a department, we support that because, as Representative Casey said, there are plenty of folks with aggravated assault charges, aggravated domestic assault charges, stalking charges that absolutely need competency restoration, or at least the opportunity to have that. We want that. We want this to build and get to that. If we were able to have it all at once, we'd want that too, because we're greedy. But we know that's not possible. So we just wanted to come in today to just request not completely cutting out corrections from the feasibility plan. Let AHS present a plan that shows both options to you. Thank you.
Questions? Thank you, Kim.
Thank you very much.
We can wait.
I think it's time to kind of wrap this up. It's been a long day. It's 4:04. I would like the committee to come back together tomorrow morning, say 9:00. Eric is he still coming in? Because I'm working on it, because I would like Eric to walk us through the other part of the bill so we see what changes have occurred there, because it is different. And we have to be aware of that. But I think for now, because we're just starting to go round and round, I think people need time to think this through. I'd like to reconvene tomorrow morning at 9:00, and for those folks who are sitting around, if you're available around 9:00, please feel free to come back. If you can't come back, you can always set up a Zoom time with Tate. But I want to continue this conversation.
Could we have,
At 9 will be in judiciary.
Well, we're just down the hall.
We'll, yeah,
You'll all be working back and forth.
Alice, I know we know most of them, but could we have the folks around the perimeter introduce themselves in what department?
Sure. Why don't we know Haley, why don't we start with the Commissioner of Dale and go around?
Or this gentleman here and go right away.
I'm gonna say your name.
Of course, it's not whatever. I'm Stuart Scher, I'm the general counsel of Dale.
I'm Jill Bowen, I'm the Commissioner of Dale. I don't think that at the core, we're so far from each other, because we all care deeply about the folks that we're serving.
We know Haley.
Yeah.
You know, okay.
Kim, you already introduced yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, whoops, someone's hiding. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's good. I hide all the time. I'm Jen Garabedian, Development and Disability Services Director.
Kim, Commissioner. So those that can make it back tomorrow morning, 9:00, and we'll be working on this all morning, pretty much.
Just let us, I mean, we can pop however you.
You're back, you're just up and down the hallway, not far. What time did they start? 9. Oh, yeah, all morning, because Mark wants to get the bill out on Thursday. No. We're totally different sections of the bill.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So let's
One and all.
go off